Hello, my name's Jade and today we will be going through all the books that I read in February. I read 12 books in February. The first book I finished this month was Normal People by Sally Rooney. I was reading this for university. If you saw my last video, then you know I'm taking a course in the love story, which I have to read different types of love involved books. This is one that I wanted to read anyway though. I really loved Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney, and so it's been on my radar for a while, and so I was really excited that I had to read it. I couldn't give myself any excuse to not read it. I did the audiobook for this one, which it took a little bit getting used to because it has an Irish accent. Sally Rooney is an Irish author and both her books are set in Ireland. I think it was just the speed and just getting accustomed to it a little bit. I read the majority of this book in one day, in one sitting. I just spent the whole day just listening to this book because I had to know what happened. Sally Rooney writes literary fiction, typically following young people and themes of love and sex and friendship and sexuality and all of the kind of trials and tribulations and complications that can come with that. So we follow two characters in this one. Our main female character, Marianne, she's not the coolest girl in school, and Connell is kind of a cool guy, and so when they start a friendship and start talking to each other more, it's a bit of an awkward situation, and then it follows them over the years and the ups and downs of them knowing each other essentially. I adored this one. It's really hard for me to say which one I prefer of the two because it's been so long since I read Conversations with Friends. It's been a couple years and this one's fresher in my memory. I remember when reading Conversations with Friends though, I wasn't thinking that much of it. I was like, yeah, this is good, it's okay, I'm enjoying it, but I don't know if I love it. But then as time has gone, I think about it all of the time, so my respect for it is clearly high. I can't remember what I gave Conversations with Friends. It might have been a 9 out of 10. I'm pretty sure I'd give this one a 10 out of 10. There's nothing that I can complain about it. It was so real and raw, and they felt like real normal people, which is something that I really love in books. 10 out of 10 for Sally Rooney's Normal People. We're off to a good start. The next book I finished this month was Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I have a full review for this one. It's already up. I'll link to it down below. So I'm going to try not to say too much here apart from the fact that I absolutely loved it. I listened to this one via audiobook as well. I started both of these in the month of January and finished them both within the first week of February. I didn't want to listen to this one too fast because I knew that I was absolutely loving it. I didn't want it to end, but it was the same thing where I had to know what happened. I was so invested in these characters. The audiobook, 100,000 out of 10 to the audiobook. It's so good. Each character has their own actor assigned to them, and this book is written as if it's a series of interviews spliced together. It sounds so real. It sounds like you're listening to real people talk about what they really went through in their experience of this band. And I came out of it not believing that this wasn't a real band. It follows the making of Daisy Jones and the Six, a rock band in the 70s, looks a lot at relationships and how messy they can be, and it was so beautifully written. There's so many lines that stuck with me so hard. I loved it. I loved it so much. 10 out of 10 to Daisy Jones and the Six forever. The next book I finished this month was the first volume of the Umbrella Academy, The Apocalypse Suite. I have already read the first 2 volumes of The Umbrella Academy, but I had yet to watch the TV show. I started it and I wasn't loving it, and so then I stopped, and my boyfriend's a really big Gerard Way fan, so I felt really guilty that we still haven't watched it. I reread them all with the hopes of watching it soon. I still haven't started it yet, but soon. I quite enjoyed this the first time around. I thought it was really quirky and different and weird, and I still think it's quirky and different and weird. Graphic novels, they're so different because they're so fast, and there will be things that just aren't explained and you just have to accept that, especially with this one because it's so quirky and weird. I enjoyed it still. I don't think I had that kind of fun surprise of oh, this is quirky and weird as I did the first one, so I don't think I enjoyed it as much. I think I'd give it a 7 out of 10. And then next I read the second volume, Dallas. The first time around I preferred the first one to Dallas, but this time around I preferred Dallas. I just think it had a stronger storyline. I was more invested in what was happening. I was more invested in the characters because we'd already been through stuff with them. So I think I'd give this one maybe a 7.5 out of 10. They are quirky and fun and weird if you've not checked them out and you're into that stuff. It's got a superhero type thing going on, but kind of with a twist. It's a little bit anti-hero at times. The next book I read was another one for the class I'm taking, the love story, and that was Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. I was worried about reading this one a little bit because it's not tiny. I knew it was set in the 50s, so it's a little bit older. And the first 40 pages I didn't love. For the most part, I had a swell time. It lost me a little bit in the end, but I think that's because I read it so quickly so that I can get ahead of my reading for the term. But I liked it a lot more than I thought it would. The back talks about how beautiful the writing is and how funny it is. When I think of Lolita and like the kind of story it's going to be and what I imagine the writing to be, it sounded weird to me that that's how it's described, but it is. It's funny and it's beautifully written. And I kind of missed the company of Humbert, our main character, who we all know he's not a great dude. You don't understand why he's doing what he's doing, but the way it's described and explained, it sounds very grounded. I found it really fascinating. It's like a character study. I really liked it. If nothing else, it's incredibly well written and incredibly well structured and thought out. So I think I'd give this one like a 9 out of 10. I have a lot of respect for it. The next book I read was Petite Mort by Beatrice Hitchman. B was my dissertation supervisor in my undergrad. So the fact that it took me this long to read her book pains me. I bought it as soon as she told me about it because my dissertation and the novel that I'm now working on is set in 1920s Paris. It follows queer people. This is set in 1910s Paris and follows queer people, so they have a similar kind of background to them. It wasn't what I was expecting just because I didn't really know what it was about, other than like a film. It's a mystery, I think, is what it is. Got different pieces of the puzzle and they kind of all weave together over time until we figure out what's really going on with this mysterious film. It was incredibly interesting and incredibly clever. I had a lot of awe of how everything was weaving it together so well, so seamlessly seeming, and how there's like little pieces of the puzzle you don't understand how they're relevant, and then as it goes on it becomes very apparent how they're relevant. The only thing I'd say about this is I didn't feel as attached to the characters as I wanted. Like I didn't really care about many of them, so personally I think I'll give it more of like a 7 or 8 out of 10. I'm so glad that I finally read it. The next book I read this month was Skullduggery Pleasant number 3, The Faceless Ones. This one was exciting because this one is the highest of the stakes that we've come up to thus far. I remember the first time I read it that this one was, I thought, much better than the first. The bar was raised up a level. 1 or 2 of my favourite characters were introduced in this one and things just start getting more interesting. I really enjoyed it again this time round. I don't have huge feelings because I know what's coming. I know where we're going. So I think I would give it an 8 out of 10. I think I'm being given most of them an 8 out of 10. I think I'd give this one also an 8 out of 10. The next book I read was the 3rd volume of the Umbrella Academy, Hotel Oblivion. So I hadn't read this one before, so this is new information to me. The story was a little bit more all over the place, and that's not necessarily a bad thing because it did come together. There were 1 or 2 aspects of it that I didn't love, but then the way some things came together was quite clever. I do think this one was interesting. It had a very different feeling than the other ones. I just don't know if I liked it as much as I liked Dallas. I did quite enjoy it though. Maybe they're about the same. I think maybe they're both like high 7, low 8 roughly out of 10. The way it left off though, I'm very excited to continue on with this series and see where it's going. The next book I read this month, oh my god, how many times am I going to say that in this video? The next book I read was This Is Not the Jess Show by Anna Carey. This was the book explosion book of the month, and so I wanted to tag along again. I had heard things about it already, and so I was already curious about it. The description that I heard of this book, it's set in 1998, and the main character, Jess, is going through normal teenage problems. She's fallen in love with her best friend. Her and her friends aren't quite getting on as much as they used to. I think the problem is, I had a very good guess what the premise was going to be from very early on. I immediately went to an existing story and thought it's going to be like that. And then it was. And it did have a different take on it. It had a different twist to it, but I think because I knew the concept, I was waiting for the reveal of the concept because I already knew it. I'm just waiting for it to be confirmed and for us to move on from there, and that happened sooner than I thought. From then on though, I liked it much less. It went downhill for me, and the more the book went on, the more frustrated with it I got. I think there was a lot of potential to go into a lot of really interesting ideas and themes here, and they just weren't tapped into. The book just turned into something else completely. It's a bummer because in the beginning I was really invested and I thought this was so interesting and cool, and I thought the writing was great, but the more it went on, the more cliches there were. I'm gonna have a spoiler section for this one because I don't want to do a full video dedicated to it. If you've not read it, mute the screen until I put the book down. Okay, spoiler warning, mute the screen. This is labelled as a thriller, so there's no fantastical element going on. It's not time travel or anything like that. So for someone to have an iPhone, the only logical explanation is it's not really 1998. Why would it not really be 1998? That compared with the fact that this looks like a set, and it's called This Is Not the Jess Show. mine immediately went to The Truman Show. I don't know if she's thinking The Truman Show is so old now that new readers wouldn't know of it. I personally don't think so. I think it's a classic. I love that film. So for the first like 100 pages until we find that out, and then it all comes out in one big blob. She didn't really hunt for it. She just so happened to stumble across the answer when she went into that guy's bathroom. I was like, what's going on here? It's not like she was putting the clues together. And then from there, obviously, we escape pretty soon. I was like, okay, cool, this is a really interesting different take. And then we find out that it's 2030, different turn. I think I would have preferred it if that wasn't the case, because I think a lot of the new technology just didn't sit well with me. The one in the shop where like there's a plastic covering and a machine would put something in your basket, like that is such a waste of time. I don't think that would happen because it's quicker to just grab something off the shelf. People aren't that lazy. And then there were screens everywhere and they were constantly showing footage from the show and interviews from the show. Like everyone was obsessed with the show. There was a whole aisle of merch in the store, and then she just so happened to go in that girl's bedroom and it just so happened to be an exact replica of her room. Like it was too much. We get it. People are obsessed with the show. I didn't love the way it ended with her parents. Like I get what it was trying to do, but it felt like it happened very fast, and it turned into this more of like a stay alive, stay away from them, rather than the weird, interesting psychological Truman Show themes that we could have gone down. And it all happened within a very short period of time. I was invested for a while and I liked their relationship, but it did happen very fast. I can't even remember his name. I think I'm just disappointed because I was very invested in the beginning. I was picking up all the clues and I was obsessing about every little thing. Knowing that it was going to be like the Truman Show, I could see how things were working. Non-spoiler people, you can come back now. So to wrap up, I'm going to give This Is Not the Just Show a 7 out of 10, maybe even a 6.5. It really disappointed me in the end. The next book I read is Paper Hearts by Meg Wiviot. This is actually written in verse, so it's entirely written in poetry. It's another one I had to read for the love story. It takes place in the Second World War and we're following Jewish people. So there are a couple trigger warnings with this one, with concentration camps and things like that. This felt like a very important read and it's based on a true story. I think there are 1 or 2 minor details that changed, but the author goes into that at the end and talks about why they did that. It's an incredibly fast read because it was written entirely in poetry. I read it within like a couple of hours and it's so stinking beautiful. I think absolutely poetry verse was the right way to go. It makes it so much more blunt and poignant. And the way the pacing worked, it feels like it's mirroring what's happening to the characters, which I really appreciated. I enjoyed the whole thing. I was right there with the characters. I was crying on and off from the middle to the end. It's just a really important and powerful story about friendship. I loved it. I would give it a 10 out of 10. I think it was phenomenal. Next, I read Nobody Told Me by Holly McNish, kind of half diary with poetry kind of interspersed throughout, and it follows this lady's pregnancy and raising her daughter for her first 3 years, how she feels about it in a really, really real, honest, raw way, and how society keep viewing her and pregnancy as a whole and motherhood as a whole and how mothers are viewed as a whole. And there was a lot of really great themes about teenage pregnancies and women in less privileged countries. It was very enjoyable. I will say that. Mad respect to Holly. It was very funny, it was very enjoyable. I think because it's not the smallest plot, it's a little bit chunky, and again I had to read it quite quickly. I think that lessened my appreciation of it because there were points where I was making myself read it rather than enjoying reading it, but it's still a really solid read. If this is something that interests you, I definitely recommend picking it up. I couldn't relate to it and I still very much so enjoyed it. I think I'd personally give this one like a 7 or an 8 out of 10, just because I think the way it was written and a lot of the poetry, to be honest, kind of went over my head. I'm not a huge poetry reader, but I still have a lot of respect for it and I still enjoyed it. So like a 7 or an 8 out of 10, I think. And the last book that I read this month is Skullduggery Pleasant Dark Days by Derek Landy, the 4th book in the series. I am storming through this series. It's only February and I've read the first 4 already. I'm very happy about that. I really enjoyed this one. I think this one is definitely my favourite so far of the ones that I reread. We have a lot of characters that we've met over the series come back in this one, and it makes for oodles of fun. Love Skullduggery and Valkyrie's relationship in this one. Big things start kicking off in this one as well, like big overarching serious things start developing in this one, so this is like where stuff really starts to get real, so that was very exciting. I think I'd still give it like an 8 out of 10, but like 8.5, maybe higher 8 than the Faceless ones and such. Very excited to continue on. Book 5 I remember distinctly being when like it got really good. And those were all of the books that I have read in February. Please let me know down below what you read in February, what your favourite book was, how many books did you read? I'd love to talk to you about it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an awesome morning, afternoon, evening / night. My name's Jade. I hope I see you again next time. Goodbye! Hey Siri. What's the first volume of the Umbrella Academy called?
Okay, I found this on the web for what's the first volume of the Umbrella Academy called.
If this is something that interests you, I would definitely recommend. Oh, what's your name? Jess. Oh my god, it's on the cover of the book. Please let me know. Let's stack this properly.